Can I start the meeting, or are we waiting for anybody?
You are free to start the meeting. I believe Zan will not be attending today.
That's the information that I had.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, thank you. All right. If we're ready to go, it is 9 o'clock, and we'll start the board meeting for Tuesday, November 24th. Let's start with introductions. I'm Pat Mullen, Commissioner.
Annabelle Huttenborough, Commissioner.
Joe Kirby, County Administrator.
Vance Crony, County Counsel.
Alyssa Rash, Public Information Officer.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kate Portia, Corvallis Benton County Economic Development Office.
Erica Milo, Board Recorder.
Teresa Farley, Board of Commissioners staff.
Mary Otley, CFO.
Jen Ambuel, Senior Financial Analyst.
Don Rogers, Sheriff's Office.
We're done. All right. I think that's everybody. There's 12 of us, according to my arithmetic. Are there any announcements this morning? Hearing none, are there any comments from the public? The board has received some information from Rick Hangartner concerning the governor's order and some of the statistics regarding COVID, and appreciate the input there. A lot of it was taken from the Portland Tribune, and so I think that's. Are there any other comments from the public?
Commissioner Morrell, I just want to clarify for the record, Mr. Hangarten's information has been inserted into your agenda under public comments from the public. I think you pretty clearly alluded to that, but I wanted to make clear that that's where those that input was slotted and has been considered by at least you and Annabelle at this point.
Okay, thanks, Vance. I tried to make that clear, but you made it clearer. So,
Just trying to help you out.
okay. We all need some help sometimes, Vance. Next up is to review and adjust and approve our agenda. There are a couple items that we're going to add under new business. 5.2 concerning the recent state assistance, the $55 million that's going to be distributed throughout the counties for small business assistance, and I think Kate Portia is going to handle that one. And also adding 5.3 discussion of the new name for the combined fair and natural area and parks departments. So are there any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
And I will second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We've got an agenda. Next up, item 4, the consent calendar in the matter of approving an enterprise zone application, Two Towns Cider House LLC. And that's Kate Porsche is handling that one. Do you have any questions, Annabelle?
None at all. I would move the consent calendar.
Okay, and I will second that. All in favor, say yes. Aye.
Yes. Or aye. Both.
Aye. Consent calendar is approved. And now we will move to the public hearing in the matter of supplemental budget number 21-05051, amending the 2019-21 biennial budget. Jen M. Buell is handling that. Vance, do I do anything else to open the public hearing?
You do not. The nice thing about this one is it's not a land use public hearing, which has a whole bunch of process and a whole bunch of steps. Jen has made this super simple for you.
I like it. Good morning.
Good morning, Jen.
I do what I can. There are 10 funds that require amendments in the 1921 biennium budget. Several of these actions do trigger local budget law for a public hearing, and that is why we are here today. There have not been any changes since these items were discussed at the November 3rd work session. So I do not foresee you guys having any questions, but please flag me down if you come across something. First item up would be the general fund. There is a net appropriation increase of $4,315,709. That would be comprised of an increase in general government operations that total $3,329,036. The funding source for the increased appropriation is the result of receiving additional CARES Act money. We would be increasing appropriations in the non-departmental division for unanticipated costs due to the COVID pandemic. Additionally, yes.
I'd point out, I think you're on page 35 of our packet.
Well, thank you, because I just have a single Word document that I'm going off of.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yes. Okay. Also, additionally, the elections department is purchasing an automated signature verification system that they received COVID grant funding for. There are a few decreases in appropriation. One would be in the assessment department for materials and services and capital outlay. And also in financial services, there is a reduction in materials and services. Both of these items were the result of a discussion we had with departments about proposed cost savings due to upcoming revenue uncertainty with the COVID pandemic. Also within the general fund, the public safety program operations decreases $488,676. There are a couple items that happen within this, even though it is a net decrease. There are funds received from the Department of Justice, the Criminal Justice Commission, and the Oregon Health Authority, and those do increase appropriations for the Emergency Management Department for the purchase of a mass care sheltering trailer and decontamination unit and supplies. The decrease in appropriations is primarily the result of no longer needing the 911 service agreement contract due to the establishment of the 911 Central County Service District. Also in the general fund, the health program operations increases $684,687. And the funding source for these would be COVID funds, an OHA grant, and transfer revenue. This is an increase in appropriation for 2.2 FTE community health workers for limited duration emergency hire contact tracers, materials, travel, and testing costs, and to reclassify 0.3 FTE from law enforcement to emergency preparedness. And then there is an increase in contracted services in order to keep the fund balanced. And then transfers to other funds decreases $34,024. This is a decrease appropriation for a 10% reduction in transfers to Intra-Governmental Services Fund. Again, this is part of the proposed cost savings discussions had due to the upcoming revenue uncertainty with COVID-19. And then the last item for the general fund, contingency increases $824,686. And that is due to the reduced transfers and then the reduced cost of the 911 agreement. And that then increases the appropriations to keep the fund in balance. So are there any questions on the general fund? Okay. The local option levy fund, there is actually a net appropriation increase of $0. It is just a reclassification of appropriation authority. Within the public safety program operations, there is a decrease of $169,828. And that would again be due to the 911 service agreement no longer being needed. And then the transfer to other funds is increased to $169,828. There is a decrease in appropriations for the 10% reduction in transfers, again to the Intra-Governmental Services Fund. And then there is an increase in appropriations for the above cost savings on the 911 service agreement in order to keep the fund in balance. And that is because we do not keep a contingency in the local option levy fund. Any questions on that one? Nope. Next would be the Oregon Health Plan Fund. This is another net appropriation increase of $0, but rather a reclassification of appropriation authority. Health program operations decreases $45,000. And this would be a decrease in the professional services to allow for an increased transfer to the general fund. Transfers to other funds increases $145,000, and that increases the appropriation of the transfer to the general fund due to the intent to close out the fund that is no longer needed. And then the remaining $100,000 of that transfer comes from contingency, so we will be decreasing that and moving the appropriation to the transfer to other funds line to transfer the funds to the general fund and close out Fund 118, the Oregon Health Plan Fund. Are there any questions on that one? No. All right. Management Services Fund, there is a net appropriation increase of $275,000. General Government Operations does increase $390,800, and that funding source would be a transfer of funds from the Employee Benefit Trust Fund. We will discuss that detail shortly. And then we do increase appropriations for the higher than anticipated liability insurance costs, and then unanticipated costs for supplies for risk management items. Contingency is decreased $115,800. We are decreasing the appropriation to move the fund out of contingency, and part of that is to offset the unanticipated costs for the CFO search and the potential financial services restructure. Are there any questions on that one? No. Okay. The Employee Benefit Trust Fund, as mentioned previously, there is a net appropriation increase of $0, but a reclassification of appropriation authority. The general government operations, we are decreasing $100,000. And we are doing that to create a transfer account line to move the funds to Management Services Fund. And that would offset the appropriations that we had discussed previously. The transfer to other funds, we are going to increase $275,000. And that creates a transfer account line to move those funds to Management Services. And that again is to create appropriation authority for those unanticipated expenditures. Contingency would decrease $175,000, and we are moving the funds out of contingency to move them to the transfer to other funds line for those additional expenditures. Are there any questions on that fund? No. Okay. Intergovernmental Services Fund, there is a net appropriation decrease of $43,204. The Public Safety Program operations decreases in that amount, and that would be the 10% reduction in materials and services and capital outlay as a result of the decreased transfer from the general fund and the local option levy funds. And those were the proposed cost savings mentioned due to revenue uncertainty as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Any questions on that one? No. Okay. The Enterprise Operations Fund, there is a net appropriation decrease of $0, rather a reclassification of appropriation authority. The Natural Areas and Parks operations is increased $90,000. That is a request to increase capital outlay due to unanticipated issues with the well at Salmonberry and to upgrade Adair restrooms to meet ADA standards. And then there is a decrease in contingency of that same $90,000 to move the funds into the capital outlay expenditure line. Any questions on that one? The Benton Health Center Fund, there is a net appropriation increase of $515,453, and that is an increase in health program operations. The funding source for this increase is HRSA and HHS COVID funds and grants and a FCC telehealth grant. This increases appropriations for 15 vitals monitoring stations, 8 PAPR kits, dental upgrades, including glass doors, windows, equipment, and technology, agricultural worker testing, including equipment, materials, and supplies, and a limited duration navigator, 3 vaccine refrigerators, 4 outdoor canopies, patient remote monitoring devices and technology, and then other materials and supplies to support COVID response. Are there any questions on the Benton Health Center Fund? Okay. The East Lynn Health Center Fund, the net appropriation increase we are asking for is $90,854. The funding source, again, is various HRSA and HHS COVID fund grants. Within the East Lynn Health Center Fund, the appropriations cover 4 vital monitoring stations, expanded dental services, 2 vaccine refrigerators, and other materials and services to cover COVID response. Are there any questions on that one? No. And the last fund would be the trust fund. There is a net appropriation decrease of, well, actually, neither an increase or a decrease of $0. It's rather a reclassification of appropriation authority. Trust operations would increase $20,100, and that would be to increase appropriations for capital outlay for improvements and restorations at Fort Hoskins. The intent is to close out the trust going forward in the upcoming biennium. And then we would decrease contingency that $20,100. And that would be to offset any of the improvements, restorations at Fort Hoskins. Overall, the net appropriation increase is $5,153,812. Of that, operations accounts for $4,274,222. Transfers account for $555,804, and contingency would be increased $323,786. Are there any additional questions? No. And then just Financial Services does recommend the board approve the supplemental budget 21051 as presented.
So moved.
Well, need to ask if there's anybody who wishes to provide any public testimony.
You're correct. You're correct.
Commissioner Malone, you are muted.
There it goes. Thank you. I believe the meeting motion is on page 27.
Commissioner Malone, have you called for anybody wishing to provide public testimony? Unmuted.
Would anyone like to provide public testimony on the supplemental budget? Hearing none, I'm ready for a motion.
I think my microphone is on. I would move passage of the supplemental budget.
All right, I will second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, and Jen, I really appreciate the format. It's the bullet points and relatively easy to follow versus some Excel spreadsheet that sometimes we get. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. When the supplementals tend to be this large, I had to find a very concise way to not only present it to you, the commissioners, but also to keep track in my mind so I can get those adjustments made properly. So thank you.
Great. Do I close the public hearing, Vance? Is that the proper?
That is correct, and resume your public meeting.
All right. The public hearing is closed, and we will resume the board meeting with item number 5, new business, 5.1, in the matter of signing the Community Development Block Grant for Micro Enterprise Grant Assistance Contracts. I think that's Rebecca Taylor. Is she with us here?
Commissioner Malone, I do not see Rebecca currently on the line.
I don't either.
Kate, is this something you feel comfortable taking on?
Good morning, y'all. To be quite honest, I thought this was actually scheduled for a future meeting. Perhaps that's where the confusion is. But I don't know, and I apologize because I don't know exactly what she was going to ask for. I do know that we are working with Rebecca on moving forward the CDBG program, and I do think she has some questions for you, but I don't know exactly what it's for. I apologize.
Teresa, is there a chance you could try and reach out to Rebecca real quick while we're in the meeting and see if you can reach her?
Yes, I will.
Joe,
That would be great.
I will also add that Rebecca does need board authority to have the chair sign a certification for the CDB grant. There is a page within the grant documents that requires certification from the grant application entity that we don't need to follow certain guidelines. And that's specifically something she's going to ask the board to approve, allowing Chairman Malone to execute. It would be beneficial to have Rebecca come on and tell you about that. So even if this item is not something that she's ready to have you approve right now, I do know that certification signature is something she does need, so that can be submitted preliminarily.
And Vance, what's the timeline on getting this done?
That, I'm sorry, I just don't know. You know, normally when you meet with people face to face, you kind of pick up on all the little details, but unfortunately, I don't have enough detail to carry this through for you, so I'm sorry.
Commissioner Malone, I would suggest that we move on to new business 5.2 and give Teresa the opportunity to reach out to Rebecca and see if she's available.
We can do that. So this is the discussion of the state assistance for small business. And I'm not sure if it has a name yet, but that's the $55 million statewide funding that goes directly to the counties based on a population formula. So I bet you're ready for that one.
Indeed, if you meant me, indeed I am. And let me for a moment defer to Mary or Joe to see if the two of you wanted to kick this off, or if you'd like me to jump right in.
Kate, I'm comfortable with you jumping in. As you know, I just got back from vacation yesterday, so you're much more versed in this than I am.
Indeed, and I'm happy to pause. I just saw Rebecca Taylor joined us too. I defer to the chair.
Thanks, Kate. Rebecca, we needed a discussion. It's item 5.1 in the matter of signing community development block grant for micro enterprise and assistance contract. So it sounds like we need a little more detail on that, and if fill us in, that would be great.
All right, is there specific details that I can fill in, or just a general description of the project and where we're at with it?
And what we're supposed to do.
Okay. Well, so with this grant contract, this was basically the culmination of all the documentation and processes that we initiated while at the EOC. So we have various different documents that are in parallel efforts trying to be completed in order to meet the requirements of this grant application. So this document that you're reviewing today is the contract basically agreeing to comply with all the requirements as required by a community development block grant for this particular program. Once we complete this by having the chair sign it, we will submit that to the state, which will then initiate the 12-month period in which we have to disperse the funds within the community development block grant program for the small business and micro enterprise support for businesses that were impacted by COVID. So in this case, while this does start the clock for the 12-month period, we still have other tasks that we need to complete before we can actually draw funds. So I'll stop there to see if I'm addressing kind of your questions in the right direction.
I think you're off to a good start. So the idea is that the chair needs to sign the document to get the process rolling. Is that correct? And then some more work is done after this.
Correct. So there was a lot of documentation, and you may have recalled that we needed your signature for previous portions of this, like the submittal of the application, and so this contract is really sort of that sealing the deal that we are initiating this process with the county. And so in that case, this would, I guess, require a discussion if we're not at that place with agreement on moving forward.
Okay, I remember the discussion that Corvallis has been
B1,
in this program
I-26,
for a while.
B12, 1030.
And that we are kind of the county's just getting going on getting in on this process. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, so as far as from a historical standpoint, the county has not been engaged in a CDBG program or grant application since around 2012. So a lot of the documentation has expired since, and so some of the tasks that we will be continuing to work on after this step is to accomplish some of those other larger documentation and assessments of county operations to demonstrate that we're in compliance with federal guidelines. So this was sort of getting our toes wet in a sense, as we discussed during the EOC, to figure out if this was an opportunity to initiate some of those steps on a smaller scale to explore if the county does want to continue a more robust community development block grant program. And also the discussion was how can we partner with the city on these efforts as well, tapping into some of their expertise as well. So those are all discussions. Obviously, I don't want to get too deep into those. They are separate from this task this morning, but certainly is something that staff are working together to make it a little bit clearer when we reapproach the board about.
Okay. And assuming we approve this today, can my signature be done electronically, or do I need to actually sign the document?
Actually, I don't think that I have clarified that with the state, so that's a good question, which I can have answered pretty shortly, as far as whether it can be electronic signature or not.
Okay. Because that could speed up the process a little bit if that's the case, but I will, let me know what I need to do. Annabelle, do you have any further questions? I think there's a motion on page 75, if we're ready for that.
Would you read the motion? I can't get to the document right now.
I can do that. I move to approve the signing of the Community Development Block Grant for COVID-19 funds for emergency small business assistance and micro enterprise grant assistance.
That's my motion.
And I will second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And I guess Rebecca, get back to us on, so the motion's been approved, so it's just a matter of getting the signature on the document and let us know how we have to do that.
I will get back to you as soon as I can. I appreciate your time and consideration.
Because Teresa is a wizard at getting my signature magically floating around on paper. So if it can be done electronically, talk to Teresa, I think would be the most best way to do that.
I agree that Teresa is a wizard.
Right. Thanks, Rebecca.
I will have to remind Teresa that my signature is no longer valid after January 3rd.
Commissioner Malone, I would like to interject before we move on for the benefit of Commissioner Jaramillo that we're going to be going to Kate Porsche next, and then subsequent to that, Lori Starha and Lynn McKee will be joining us regarding the new name for the merger for the new department that we're creating. And Commissioner Jaramillo, there is an email in your email box from earlier this morning that it would be valuable if you have the ability to access that prior to that particular agenda topic. That email was from me, and so you should see that sometime around 8 o'clock this morning. And Commissioner Malone, I know that you've already seen that, so I just wanted to give Commissioner Jaramillo the opportunity to bring that up before we got to that agenda topic.
Great, thanks, Joe. So we will go back to 5.2, state assistance for small business, and I've forgotten whether Mary or Kate is going to lead us off on that. But,
I think I was going to go ahead and lead you off if that's okay, Commissioner Malone. So thank you and good morning, everybody. So some really great news to share. As I am guessing you're all aware of it by this point, we are here to discuss what we're calling the governor's $55 million pot of funding for businesses. We've had so many rounds. We've come up with sort of clever little names for each of them. So this one is the governor's $55 million. So I wanted to step you all through this very carefully. There was a long email that went out. Maybe you've read it and memorized it, but I'm guessing maybe you haven't. So let's just go through it real quickly so you understand the guidelines of what the intent of this money was to be used for. And then I've got a couple of suggestions and also a couple of questions for you all to end up with. And then I'm guessing Mary and Joe may have some questions also. So this information just came down this week. We had heard it might be coming. And again, we're just so grateful for the funds to help businesses who we're hearing are very much in need, especially after this second freeze and close down. Folks are really needing some assistance. So basically, it's $55 million in financial assistance that was pushed down to support Oregon businesses who have specifically been impacted by COVID-19, of course. And the notion here, as you indicated, Commissioner Malone, was that these funds would be allocated to counties to distribute out to businesses. And they are allowing some flexibility in how the counties set this up. So it's a little bit different than what we've seen with the Business Oregon programs that were rather prescriptive in nature in terms of how they would be set up. The goal of this program was that these funds would, of course, assist businesses who are impacted by COVID, but would also prioritize assistance to businesses in the hospitality industry, and then businesses impacted specifically by the freeze, so those businesses who had to shut down is our interpretation, small businesses, and then they indicated women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and tribal-owned businesses, right? And so those were some of the priorities given to us. Those were not prescribed in terms of how we would prioritize those. They're leaving that up to the counties, but those are goals that we take very seriously in terms of how they want to get these funds out. So in terms of timing, they're moving very quickly on this. Mary probably saw, and heck, maybe she already has it. They were going to send out a contract prior to the Thanksgiving holiday, and the funds are tentatively set to be released to the counties as early as December 1st. So this is moving very fast. Interestingly enough, the governor's office, they are operating under the Treasury guidance that basically says that while these are CARES Act funds, their interpretation is that we will be getting these money to businesses who were impacted in the year 2020, but that we've got through the end of the first quarter of 2021 to actually get the funds into the hands of businesses, if that makes sense. So we've got a little more breathing room in terms of getting the checks to the businesses, if you will. And of course, I know you're all like, that sounds great. What is our number? You may have seen it. They attached a spreadsheet. They did kind of a proportionate breakdown. Yes, please.
I know the dollar amount. So
oh, you do?
That's exciting.
Was that the first thing you looked at?
Yes?
Indeed. So good on you. So the amount for Benton County is $1,316,305, which is very substantial. I know we've been working the piecemeal CARES Act money and the county's money together in these smaller funds, which have been incredibly helpful, but 1.3 million is very, very substantial. The funds are going to come through as a direct deposit, and so it won't be a reimbursement process, so that makes it a little easier for Mary and her team. So they've let us know that each county can basically come up with eligibility criteria above and beyond that minimum eligibility that we'll talk about here in a second. And we also can come up with how we want the businesses to receive funds and how we plan to market and get the word out on the funds. So in terms of eligibility, it's pretty basic eligibility, some of which we've seen before in the Business Oregon money. So pretty basic stuff. They have to be headquartered in Oregon, have their principal operations in Oregon. They need to be registered with the Secretary of State. They either need to be, this is an important one, a for-profit or a 501c3 entity. So unfortunately, this won't, the funds will not assist our 501c6 friends, but our 501c3 nonprofits could be eligible for these funds. They have to show in one of two ways that they were adversely impacted by the COVID pandemic, which is either that they were unable to operate during one of the two shutdowns, or that they can illustrate a decline in sales of 25% based on 2019 to 2020. And I want to put a pin in this one because this is just a subtlety that I'd like to come back to for one of the questions that I have for you all. They list some ineligible businesses, but I think you get the idea. This is the general terms that we had used in many ways in previous rounds as well. So in terms of looking forward, and I guess let me pause there on the basic outline. Any questions I can answer on the basic outline of information provided to us from the governor's office? Okay. Oh, sorry, Pat.
Oh, I thought, do you have a comment, Annabelle? You're muted. You're still muted, Annabelle.
I was looking for the document, Patton, and I pushed the wrong button, so I lost my screen, but I'm back. So, no, I don't have any questions right now.
Okay. I guess my main question was, we've been through this, I don't know, are we on CARES number 5 before this? And so we've had a fair amount of practice, and which is a good thing because of the significant dollar amounts. But are there any differences, any changes in this round that we need to pay attention to?
Yes, no, thank you, Commissioner Malone. I think that's a great segue into some of the suggestions that I would like to make for you to consider. And what I will say is, while we're on a short timeline, I think we've got a little bit of time to hone this in. And what I'd like to propose is that we kick around some ideas today. In terms of next steps for our office, we're actually having a phone call at noon with our partners at Community Lending Works and with our other regional folks in the South and Mid-Willamette Valley to talk through questions that we're all having and kind of get on the same page. We'd like to, if possible, create as much regional parity as possible. Now, it's possible that what Benton County wants to do may not exactly match Lane County, but the thought being our region has, we communicate frequently, we're generally on the same page, and if possible, we'd like to align our programs. So with that, a couple of suggestions I'd like to make. One, in our local funds, the way we've set up, as you guys recall way back, the first Benton County Fund, and now the second Benton County Fund, which is actually set to launch tomorrow. We structured both of those as a lottery format. And both myself, my partners in the region, and our partners at Community Lending Works feel very strongly that the lottery format is really best in terms of creating equity and equal access to the funds. There are plenty of studies that show that the first come, first served model tends to serve affluent white folks, right? And we know that already our minority businesses and minorities in general have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic. So we want to be very purposeful in how we think about the allocation of money. So I would very much suggest that we structure it as a lottery, which is the same structure we're using, again, that we used way in the way back and that we're going to use in the fund that's about to open. Also, we would like to suggest that we structure it with a preference for minority-owned businesses. And again, this is how we structured your first round and the round that's just about to open. What happens is that behind the scenes, if applicants indicate that they are a minority business, they are actually entered into a separate pool, a separate lottery for minority-owned businesses, and so that they basically rise to the top. If there's extra funds available from that, we're able to roll it into the general fund, or if that is overprescribed, any applicants who didn't receive the money, they're then eligible to be part of the broader lottery. But we think that's a really good way to go, and again, that's the system that you all have been using to this point. Let me pause on those two items, and I'd like to get to a couple of the questions that I had for you all.
My question, the format that you developed, and I can't remember which round it was. It was early days, and Benton County had put in $100,000, and now I think there was a $50,000 match. And so that's where you came up with the lottery format, and I think 30% went to outside of Corvallis and minority businesses. Am I remembering correctly?
Yes, you're exactly right. 30% went to businesses outside of Corvallis metropolitan, outside the city limits of Corvallis, and 25% went to minority businesses, which were both targets that you all had set and we felt very good about achieving.
And it sounds like we may follow that format going on this round.
And definitely on the minority side. It's interesting on the urban rural, or the city rural. In that past round, and as well as the round that's about to open tomorrow, we have structured it where we have a specific carve out for the minority-owned businesses, but we're not, or a specific prioritization, I should say, for the minority-owned businesses. But we have not done a specific prioritization for the businesses outside of the Corvallis area, and I will tell you why. Our outreach, we're being very purposeful about the outreach to folks in Philomath and Monroe and Adair, and even folks outside of those communities, to be very clear that they know this is happening. And generally, we're finding that we're meeting that 1/3, 2/3 threshold just by the proportionality of businesses in Benton County, if that makes sense.
Kate, I guess I would ask, what is the harm in having that requirement? If in fact it's happening naturally, why don't we ensure that it's going to happen based on how the board directed it in the past?
We certainly could. We certainly could. I think it just, if that is the direction, we absolutely can set it that way. I think we need to be clear that then I think my question would be, if we don't have 30% of applicants or 33 that come from the rural areas, is it okay then if we roll the balance back to the general pot of funding, if that makes sense? Okay, so I'm hearing a 25% focus for minority, and then a 33% or 1/3 for rural.
And I guess I would have that as a guideline or a goal, but that it's not a fixed, and like you say, have that as a goal, and if you're under that, then that goes back into the general fund. I like that structure.
Okay.
My question, Kate, is how long how long does this program last if we work slowly through it?
I think the goal is that we know by the end of the month to whom the allocations are being made, and that we have then first quarter to make those payments.
Okay, that was the timing framework. Okay.
That's my understanding.
And by first quarter, you mean March 31st, 2021?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, yes, first quarter of the calendar year. Thank you.
Kate, did we previously have any constraints on the amount of money that somebody could actually apply for? And then also talk about what you foresee happening here.
We did, and that was actually one of the questions I had, Joe, so thank you. That was such a nice segue. We have, I will say this is one area where we've deviated a little bit from Lane County. Lane did a local program recently. Their numbers were more substantial than ours. I think we have taken a stance of maybe keeping the numbers a little bit lower, but helping more businesses. But again, that's a policy question for you all. So let me walk you through this. In the current round that we're about to open, we are structuring it where sole proprietors are eligible for $2,500. Businesses of 1 to 5 employees are eligible for $5,000. Businesses of 6 to 15 employees are eligible for $7,500. And businesses of 16 to 25 are eligible for $10,000. And I'm going to really quickly just paste that in the chat here because I know that was just a whole bunch of numbers that I just rambled off. So let's see if it'll work for me. If not, I can email it to y'all later today. We would like to propose that same structure here. One question we have, though, is would you like to also include some of our larger businesses? That is, what I think our team is thinking about is that you could include businesses of 25 to 50 employees, which we don't have a ton of, but there are quite a few. This is like, Block 15, Two-Town Cider House, so, that sort of medium-sized business. And a logical number for them would be $15,000. So again, that's one question, and I don't know that we need to decide today, and I'm happy, Joe, to bring it back like in an actual diagram with recommendations that y'all could look at.
I would like to see that, yeah.
I'm favorably inclined to adding the 25 to 50 category since we have significantly more dollars to work with than we did this before.
And I was going to pause too. I saw Mary's microphone is off. I didn't know Mary. I was talking over a question you might have had.
I do, because I'm sort of confused, because we have the $100,000 that we're releasing in ready. So that's, are you calling that the second round and the 1.3 million the third round? I just want to make sure or are we not even talking about the $100,000 that we're going?
The $100,000 for the current round of the CARES Act money?
Yeah, when you say, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by current.
Thank you. No, it's a really good question. So when I talk about the current round, which is about to open tomorrow, that is the $100,000 that Benton County put in, and I'm missing the number. I think it's 130 from the city in CARES Act money. And the reason I call that the second round, and this is so confusing, I need to give them dog names or something. This is round Rover. But the reason is because the Business Oregon now has had 5 of their own rounds, and I'm calling this one the second local round because we're using our own local funds.
We're trying. I mean, I think you're getting suggestions for the current round and then for the governor's round, and that's. I think we're mixing them up. I think.
Okay, well, and my understanding is that the suggestions that we're hearing today, we would all apply to the governor's round.
Okay.
Okay. So Commissioner Malone, I heard you on the 25 to 50, so I can include that on the final proposal that comes back. The other piece that we haven't figured out, and I will ask it as a question that you don't need to answer today, and we're going to work on this regionally and on our team, is how we create a fair and equitable way to focus on the sectors that the governor mentioned. So hospitality, businesses that were forced to close. It's possible that we just do a list of the types of businesses that had to close during whatever that was, phase 2. I think what we're going to do is have this conversation and work to figure out what that could look like and bring it back to you. But if you have a brilliant idea on it, please let me know, because we take seriously their guidance that they would like a portion of this money to be focused on those certain sectors.
I think that makes sense to try to characterize our businesses and line up the ones that have been the most impacted. On the number of employees, is that FTE? And so if you have 3 part-time people, does that add up to one person, or how are those numbers generated?
I will need to double check that. I believe it is FTE, but Commissioner, let me confirm that, and I will be very clear on that when I come back in front of you.
Thanks.
So the last item that I wanted to talk to you about, and this goes back to the policy piece that was subtle that I asked you to put a pin in and think about, which is we have had inquiries from a handful, 3 or 4 businesses who started in 2020. Some of these businesses were already underway with their business plans or had already purchased property at the end of 2019. You know, just to give you an example would be the Common Field that opened in Corvallis, Little Food Cart Pod, and there's some others though that are out in the county. The interesting thing with these new businesses is that thus far they have been ineligible for all funds because all of the funds have required that comparison of 2019 to 2020 profit and loss to show that they were in business and strong and that have had a loss due to COVID. So our new businesses, these 2020 businesses, have said, hey, you know, many of us are in these same sectors. Yes, we just opened our businesses in the early part of the year, but we have also been adversely affected. And so our team has been trying to brainstorm. We think there could be a path forward to help these businesses. We think it's a really small number. Our inclination is maybe that we do a very modest set aside, you know, even 50,000 or something, but figure out a way to help those businesses because until now they're being completely missed. But again, I wanted to ask you all and see if that was of interest, and if so, we would continue to pursue it.
I like that idea. I mean, I understand it's easier to ascertain the impact if you have a track record of several years of business, but I don't think it makes any sense to say, well, gee, you're hard to figure out, so we'll leave you out. I mean, I don't, that doesn't seem like really that's our intent. And so I would encourage you folks to pursue that and figure out how to, I can see if they're in the sectors, the hospitality, restaurant sectors, that we definitely should take a look at them and try to figure out what's fair. But just because they're hard to quantify, I don't think they should be left out.
Wonderful, thank you. So the last item I had is a question, and perhaps maybe, I think is ultimately for you all, but maybe gears more toward Mary and her team. which is there is the option to in how we want to administer these funds. I will say, you know, again, I'm always want to lay it all out for transparency. Mary's team, should you all choose, should Mary say yes, certainly could administer this, do the background assessment and like that, and it would save us 6%, basically, because that's the administrative fee that our partners at Community Lending Works have been charging to do this work, which I actually think is a heck of a deal. I don't know what Mary thinks. And that would mean you'd have 6% funds, more funds, about $78,000 that you could get out to businesses. Now, you cannot reimburse yourselves for administrative fees. So Mary's time, her team's time would not be reimbursable if you go that route. If it was up to me, and Mary and I haven't chatted about this at all, and I welcome your thoughts, I would suggest that we continue to work with Community Lending Works as our community development finance partner. There is another CDFI in our area. It's Central Willamette Bank, and they are wonderful. But I think our track record of Community Lending Works has been good. They've handled other programs until now. And I think the 6% fee for all the work that they do to review the applications, gather the information, narrow it down, run the lottery, transfer the funds out is funds well spent. But I wanted to ask that question of you and of Mary.
Well, it's not high on our list of things we want to administer in the next month. Yeah, no. I have a question. What's my question? Does Community Lending have the capacity? Are they going to do other counties as well?
I'm so glad you asked, Mary. And this was I think I emailed you and Joe. Yesterday was a scramble of very late phone calls and trying to get everything set. So I did have a phone call with their manager, their lending manager. He confirmed they will have the ability to do this. And I wanted to assure you that because it's not just us, it's Lane County, other partners who are looking to work with them. Their plan is to hire additional staff, possibly some temps to help with some of the, the review course, but actually some longer term permanent staff because one, help with pushing these funds out. We've got our local round, Layton County has a local round, and they believe there's going to be a likelihood of further federal funding with the new administration, and they want to be really teed up and ready. So I'm glad you asked, but they did assure us that with the hiring of these new teammates, that they would be able to handle this for us and for the other counties as well.
Kate, is the 6%, is that a certainty or can that be negotiated, especially if they're doing it for more than one organization? Can they reduce the percentage to something less than 6%?
It's interesting. I can certainly ask, and I'm never afraid to try and negotiate for you guys. The feeling I've gotten is that is somewhat of a certainty, but I will tell you, I have heard that there were some other folks charging 9, so I felt like the 6 was already pretty good, but I don't mind asking to see, again, to your point, that, with economies of scale, that if we're all going in together, perhaps we could get a better deal. So I will inquire.
I would certainly ask that, and I would underscore Mary's position on this, that at this point in time with our budget, with Mary's transition getting ready to take place, and a number of other items, we just don't have the capacity to take this on in the time frame required. So I think we either need to outsource it as we have others, or question for you, Kate, does your department have the ability to take this on?
I don't think so. I think we would, because it's just the 3 of us. Jerry is now half-time, so I'm really at 3.5 FTE at this point in time. And I'm not sure we have the expertise to review the profit and loss statement. So I think our answer is no.
Okay, thank you.
I would go along with the trend in the discussion. So Community Lending Works handled the first round or some round for us. So we would we have a working relationship with those folks. And
yes, they've handled both local rounds. the original and the one that's about to open, and they've also handled the 4 rounds, some of which involved Benton County money, some of which was money that went directly to them from Business Oregon for our area.
I mean, there's a cost to administrating this, and we could pretend that it's a better deal if we have Mary's crew do it, but that I don't think that makes sense. So you can ask about the 6% rate for Community Lending Works, but I think. I mean, you have the day-to-day knowledge of how they've operated, and if you're happy with their performance, I would say let's use them again. And that this is, I think that it's a reasonable amount. They know what they're doing. The paperwork gets handled like it in a timely manner and gets done. I'm comfortable, and there is a cost, so somebody will pay it, and I think since we already have the relationship with them, do it again.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So those were really the large sort of questions that I had for you. So if it feels good, what I'd like to do is step away with the information that you've provided today, work with Community Lending Works, talk with our regional folks later today, and then come back with an outline that I'd be able to get hopefully in your packet ahead of time. If nothing else, I can certainly email it to you on the day of the morning meeting so you could look at it and get them on your next meeting so we can finalize what the program is like.
It definitely feels good, Kate. This is, and maybe it's a good thing we started out with smaller amounts and got some practice on how to proceed and include as many people as we can in the lottery format. I think, fortunately, we had the example of Lane County and first come, first serve, and in 10 minutes, all the 400,000 was gone, and 17 businesses were winners, and 200 were missed the boat. So I think we're on the right track here, and just keep us informed. I know I talked to you last Friday, and it was, well, some money's coming, and we don't know how much, and we don't know when, and so this is a couple working days later, and you have a whole lot more information, and I think this is really good news for our local businesses.
No, we agree. We couldn't agree more. And I will say the other, just if, for those of you that were curious, there was most recently the Business Oregon Round 5. That opened up very quickly. This was the 20 million. There were two announcements that came out. There was the governor's 55 and then this 20 million. Business Oregon structured that as first come, first serve. We found out about it at 12:45 on one day, and they opened it a day later at 3:45 in the afternoon. We spread the word to as many people as we could. And that 20 million was spoken for. In fact, they upped it to 25 because they think some folks aren't going to fly. So, but they have 25 million in applications in under 20 minutes. So one, I think that really illustrates the need that exists. But I also, at least in my mind, I'm really happy that we're working on a setup that is a lottery just to create equity and allow folks to get to the table and put in their requests. So I'll definitely bring this back. I know Commissioner Ojiro was not available today, but in case she watches this back, I do know she had an inquiry from Senator Sarah Gelser with some questions and thoughts on this, and I wanted to let you know that the Senator and I have a phone call scheduled for tomorrow, so I'll be sure to capture her ideas and what she's hearing from her constituents and bring back any suggestions or thoughts that she might have as well. And I'll work with
Great.
Teresa to get on your calendar again.
Yeah, Kate, two things. Number one, please do work with Teresa. I'd like to have this as a official agenda item on the December 1st agenda, I think is our next meeting. And I do know that Teresa is, I think, going to be off later this week. So logistically speaking, regarding the packet and information, if you'll work with her to make sure that happens. And then the second question for you, early on in the conversation, you had mentioned that this money actually, while it apparently needs to be committed by the end of the year, you do have until the first quarter of next year to provide that money to businesses. And the question that I have surrounds that particular deadline. Mary and I have been increasingly frustrated by the lack of flexibility, and in some cases we're being forced to spend money because of a deadline with CARES Act funding. And earlier on you said there was I'll use the word interpretation, that this money could be spent in 2021, the first quarter. And so I'm wondering, why is that the case regarding these funds, and that has not been the case with the other dollar amounts in the millions of dollars that we've been dealing with?
And I'm so glad you asked that, and know that I asked that same thing. It was like, hey, wait a minute, because I know you all at the city, we've been struggling with this, have to get it out by December 30th. So their interpretation, I can send this, Joe, to you and Mary offline. Their interpretation is because these funds are they're going to be grants to businesses who were affected in 2020 to pay them for negative effects in 2020, that takes care of the December 30th deadline, and that it's okay then if they don't actually receive the funds until till May, whatever that, or March, the end of March in 2021. Now, let me give you a difference. So, if, for example, you guys went in jointly with us on one of our programs for legal services. Okay, this is a perfect example. We really push back because we're worried about getting these services out the door, but the way it reads is basically the services have to be rendered by the end of December. So for the legal services, the business has to come in and see that legal representative and have that work done by December 30th. And I think the governor's team is interpreting that the service is the hit that the business took, and that occurred in 2020, therefore they're meeting it. But I'll forward you some email chatter that I've had that you all can look at and see if there's something helpful in there for you.
No, that makes sense. It's like the money was spent. The business lost their money, and
Yes.
and now we're reimbursing them for the loss.
Exactly. Whereas if it's a new program, that's where it gets sideways. That we can't. So, for example, I can't render those legal services into January because then that's when the service is actually being provided, and that is the piece that needs to be done before the 30th of December. And I'm sorry, Joe, did you say something? Yeah. Okay.
Kate, yes, just asking to have you forward that to Mary and I. That would be helpful. Thank you.
I'd be happy to. Thank you. And thank you all for your time today and letting me come into this agenda and be a part of the process. We're really excited about what this is going to mean for our businesses in Benton County, and we appreciate your support and guidance on this.
Well, we really needed some more details, and appreciate all the work you've done in the last day to be able to provide it with us. And I would absolutely encourage you to call this round the governor's $55 million baby or fund, because it is confusing, and I can remember that dollar amount, and that's a unique dollar amount. So I would really encourage that that's what we all call it, so we have some idea what which one we're talking about.
Indeed.
So, thank you. And
thank you all.
Any other questions for Kate? Get to work, Kate.
You bet.
Thank you. All right. Next up, 5.3, discussion of the department potential department names for the fair and the natural areas and parks merger. And
Commissioner Malone, I'll just take this one to begin with, and then I'll turn it over to Lori and Lynn.
okay,
Commissioners, thanks for letting us add this on your agenda as a topic today. As you're aware, due to Lori Starhaw's pending retirement early next year, we've done a organizational analysis and have decided to merge our Natural Areas and Parks Department with our Fairgrounds Department. Lynn McKee is set to be the department head over both of those areas now, and so we're actually merging. And we have been working on transition issues, and Lynn and Lori have made a lot of progress over the course of the last couple of weeks. We met yesterday to look at the host of transition issues that are still outstanding, and one of those issues is really resolving the name of the new department. I know that there's been at least one cursory conversation with the board on this topic, but since we are set to come back before you December 1st, officially approving this new department, while it's ideal to have the name of it at that point, it's not absolutely required. So if the board is not able to arrive at a decision today, we would certainly be able to come back to you in December, sometime after December 1st with additional conversation. But you are set December 1st to make the official determination and decision to merge. And if we had the name at that point, it would be ideal, but like I said, not required. So with that being said, I'd like to turn this over to Lynn and Lori and commissioners. I did forward about a half a dozen names to you earlier this morning that both Lynn and Lori had considered. And I'd like maybe, Lynn, you can start out with what your recommendation is to the board, or was at least a couple of weeks ago, to kind of set the stage for the conversation.
Okay, thank you, Joe. We had, Lori and I had originally looked at a list. Lori, actually, it was very good to generate an initial list of potential names that I went through, and she and I had some discussions, and the outdoor recreation and events is the name that Lori and I originally chose. We thought it covered the full gamut of what we do, and it includes parks, recreational RV parks, and our events. And we thought it aligned well with the 2040 initiative and the focus on outdoor recreation. But we then met with our staff members. We had a combined meeting of both parks and fairground staff, and the staff came back with a couple of recommendations for other names from their perspective. And one of them, Jennifer Ward, had come back with wanting to add conservation to it, because, and I certainly understood that because of our focus on natural areas. So that's where we came down to. We also put, so we had a number of names that were laid out for us by Jennifer. We also had the classic Parks and Recreation on the table, because that's what the city of Corvallis and Lynn County use, so it'd be consistent with their naming. But that's kind of where we are now. And so, Lori, what would you like to share?
So, I mean, this is a big shift, and we want to make sure that whatever title of the department we come up with really conveys the mission and purpose of this department. And I wanted to make sure that the commissioners had an opportunity to think about appropriate names, and maybe provide some additional context for us to consider before our meeting next week on December 1st, or throughout the rest of the month, coming up with the best name that fits what we've done as far as combining those departments. And so I think it's more of a dialogue with the commissioners, if they've had some time to think about names.
I have not. I think I was aware of the original outdoor recreation and events, but the other additions just came in this morning, and so I really haven't had any time to think about that, and I would kind of second Joe's comment. We need to approve the idea for the merger in a week, but we may want to take longer than that to come up with a name, because I think it's important for the community to know what we're talking about. And you mentioned what Corvallis and Lynn County call theirs. Could you repeat that one?
They use the classic Parks and Recreation, which a lot of organizations use, like the TV show. Anyone seen Parks and Recreation? So that's what the city of Corvallis uses and Lynn County uses. But, you know, as Lori and I discussed, the outdoor recreation name really aligns well with the 2040. So that's, and the outdoor recreational events really cover everything that we do in a nice, clean package. So I think there's, I think you could argue for either of those. I mean, a lot of them have merit. I think it's just a matter of what makes sense with aligning to our mission, and kind of, and I'm selfish. I wanted a little shorter than longer when I'm introducing myself and have my business card. So, but definitely a number of them have merit for discussion.
Commissioners, I did receive an email from Commissioner Ozero in response to the information that I had sent out. And as you're aware, she's not here today. But based on the names that were displayed on that email, her preference out of those names was the core, conservation, outdoor recreation, and events. So I told her that I would share that with you as input as you deliberate today.
I want to get back to the first one, Lynn, in terms of when you talked about Parks and Recreation. I think also looking at what Zan said, one of the core functions of our Parks Department has been conservation and in natural areas. And Parks and Recreation just doesn't fit that for me in terms of what I think needs to be in the title. So, and why I lost you all a while ago, I was trying to open that email to see your list, Joe, but I wasn't able to get it open. So I mean, I still have to study that a little bit more. So I mean, this is going to take some thought, and I recognize that we don't want such a lengthy title that then everything gets lost in the length of the title, so to speak. But I do want whatever we pick to reflect the core values we have for both entities, the recreation part, the fair part, and also the conservation and the stewardship piece, because those are very important components to me.
And I like the fact that has a nice little acronym there, CORE. So Jennifer Ward actually recommended that name, suggested that one. And, you know, but it was kind of nice to have the CORE. You know, I'm kind of picturing, you know, logos and branding, because my side, I'm looking at marketing. So, so I kind of like any acronym we can use.
Lori, what are your thoughts?
When I saw the recommendations come through, especially with CORE, I really like that. The conservation and the natural areas are really important. And I am not one of those thinkers that can think of really catchy names and, you know, acronyms and all that. So I was actually very pleased to see that as an option to consider, and the fact that, you know, CORE is short and brief. Hey, we're the CORE department. I'm sure we can do a lot of marketing around that. But I agree with you, Commissioner Jaramillo. The shift from Parks and Rec occurred a number of years ago, and the focus is really natural areas, conservation, stewardship,
And that's where primarily most of our lands reside in. And the Parks and Rec is a small component of what we do now.
All right. I think, especially with Commissioner Rogereau not here today, this would, it would be nice to have some regular people response. If you show them that name, what does that mean?
Right.
I think we're because it's it may be a unique name. It may take a while to for people to know what it means. When you say parks and natural areas, that's okay. I think I get that, but this is a little bit different approach, and I guess my thought is it will take a while for the word to filter around what it means to general citizens.
Commissioner, how would the commissioner like to move forward today? Do you want to have staff bring this back to you again at a future meeting for further discussion? And if so, when would you like that to happen? And so I would put that out there for the board to think about.
I think that I would like to think about it a little bit, Joe. And additionally to that, I've not heard back from the two advisory committees on either one, and whether this has been floated by the membership of those committees. I'm talking about parks and then the fair board.
I think Lynn and Lori can address that.
I did run it by the fair board, some of the different names. They did not seem concerned about the department name. Their main focus was that the Event Center and Fairgrounds retain its identity and its name and its logo and its marketing. So that seemed to be their main concern than the overarching department name. But but I will bring that back around to them again in December after we've shared a few more discussions, so I can share their insight with them.
I would say from the park board, no, the list of names has not been shared with the park board yet. The next meeting is slated for December 9th. I can certainly have them look over the names and provide feedback at that meeting.
I think we could have further discussion at our meeting next week, which is December 1st, and I would agree with Joe. It would be ideal if we could agree on a name at that point, but with flexibility to, if we're not ready or want to hear from Parks Board, that we have some more time to get information and input.
Commissioner Malone, would you like us to put this as an agenda item on December 1st, or do you want Lynn and Lori to have a dialogue again with their respective boards first and then bring it back to the board after that?
I guess my question for you is how important is it to try to come to a decision December 1st?
I don't think it is that important. Once again, it would be great, but I would much prefer that the board feel like they've had the time to think through this topic before you decide on a name, because once we name it something, it's not like we're going to turn around and change it a year later. So I'd much rather have you have the time to deliberate as opposed to rushing you into decision.
Well, maybe we could have some discussion next week under other, just see if, maybe a relatively short discussion and see if we're getting anywhere close to a consensus.
We can certainly do that.
Okay.
I think I would like that as well. Again, I'd really like to think this through. This is a big change.
All right. Any other comments on this subject?
Lynn and Lori, if you can be available next week for our meeting, that would be great.
Will do. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, item number 6, information sharing. Do you want to lead that off, Joe? Or,
Commissioners, as you know, I just returned from vacation yesterday. One of the things that I came back to is a request from the city of Corvallis for the county to provide approximately $125,000 to assist with funding a managed campsite for folks that are experiencing homelessness. A managed campsite would be immediately adjacent to the existing cold weather shelter, or what we know as the cold weather shelter here in Corvallis. It appears that they are trying to, and this came up apparently a week or 2 weeks ago with the city council and the city manager, where the council directed the manager to look into having a managed campsite, and they were willing to commit $125,000. And when I use that term 125, that's with the understanding that it's within $1,000 of that one way or another. But apparently, according to Sean Collins in dialogue that he has had with members of the city, they think it would cost upwards of $250,000 to have a managed campsite for the course of the next year, as I understand it. And so they, city council, said that they would be willing to commit 125 of that, and asking the county to contribute approximately 125 of that. And when I talk about this managed campsite, I have very little information at this point other than what I just shared, with the addition of one thing. And that one thing is they were envisioning having 25 campers that are part of this managed campsite. So when you envision the cold weather shelter here in Corvallis and the property adjacent to that, I believe there's campers currently on that at this point in time as a result of the COVID response. But that's the area that the city is referring to, and they're indicating it would be around 25 campers that would be allowed to be part of that managed campsite. Mark Shepard acknowledges that there's very little details currently around this particular proposal, and he has the ball in his court to get back to me with more details so that I can provide the board more details. Right now it's just a idea, a concept that when he sent me the email had very little details. So right now the board doesn't need to take any action. I just wanted to give you a heads up that that dialogue was going on between myself and the city manager. I have not had the chance to check in with Suzanne Hoffman and or Julie Arena on this particular topic, but as we get more information, I will ensure that they are involved in the dialogue. So I would expect to be coming back to the board probably by the middle of December with more detailed information. I believe the city manager was going to be talking with city council in more detail around December 7th. So there should be more more information available subsequent to that meeting.
Joe, I think this came up a week ago yesterday at the city council meeting, and my understanding is staff was surprised, or that it was just, I don't know how many city councilors had been working on this and then brought it to that meeting, and I have a problem with not being involved, the county not being involved in the initial discussions, and the city deciding that this was a good project and that the county should pony up half the cost. Just the process is not very good. And again, this is not the first one. It just seems like the councilors are trying to decide something and then say, well, come on, county, do your part, instead of having mutual discussions on what the project is and why it's worthy, and where you could have an opportunity to figure out what else we're currently doing that may we may already be doing some of this, and versus, here's a shiny new thing that we want to start.
Understood, and I would say that the city manager used similar words as relates to being surprised by this request, and he just wanted to put it on my radar, and I didn't want any of you to be surprised by it. So that was just the purpose of me bringing it up at this point, and I will be bringing back additional information to you once I have that from the city, and we will also be trying to involve our health department folks if they haven't already been part of the conversation at this point. They may have, and I may not just be aware of it because I was on vacation.
Yeah, I had heard this from another source as well, and the other source that had talked to me about it was really kind of feeling, I'm kind of describing just what you were saying. It come to you after the discussion has occurred, and we haven't been part of that discussion. Have we done an assessment of what our other communities in the county need in terms of serving the homeless? I don't know. And that, to me, it seems to all be centered around Corvallis, and I don't mean to be negative about that, but we don't know what the situation is in Adair Village or LC or Monroe, and they may be having issues too. So I think this takes a lot more discussion. There's a homeless camp just south of our property line in that forest land near Gene Tools in the sorting yard, and I don't know what's going on there, but I haven't heard anything from the city of Paloma with wanting us to intervene or get working on that one. I think we just need to talk this through a little bit more.
Commissioner Jaramillo, I can tell you that Julie Arena has been working with and speaking with each one of the town managers within Benton County, and as a matter of fact, I met with her just before I left on vacation, and she provided indications that she was having conversations with Pat Hare and also Chris Workman from Adair and Philomath. So I do know that there are conversations beginning to go on regarding what's happening in those two communities. It seems like, from what I can tell, that Philomath is more impacted than Adair at this point. But do know that Julie Arena has been in touch with those folks and is trying to involve them in the conversation. And really the best place for this conversation to develop is really within our HOPE group. And they may have talked about this, and maybe there was a jump start of some sort with City Council. But At this point, I have not had a chance to talk to Suzanne Hoffman and or Julie, but didn't want you to be surprised. And it sounds like you've already been hearing about this already. So I appreciate your feedback, and I will take that into account and share that initial feedback with the city manager. And then once he has additional information for me, then I will provide that to you.
Okay. I guess my concern is how does this fit in with what we're already doing versus starting something new that, well, just what you said, the hope, we are doing things already, and that how does this fit in? Does it fit in? And just I'm just concerned about shiny new thing versus how does this? We have Operation Turnkey and potentially purchasing hotel, motel, or non-congregate housing. Does this fit in with that, or it just seems like we have some things already going, some things that are in discussion, and it's got to be more coordinated and thoughtful going forward, because this could be a significant commitment, and I assume it's not a one-time thing. It's would be ongoing. And do we have currently the staff to just what you said, how does our health department fit in with this, and do we have staff currently, or would we have to do additional staff? And just a lot of questions. So
Commissioners, as I look to the future couple of weeks, the city manager, I believe, is talking with his board again, either December 7th or 8th. We also have a goal setting scheduled for December 8th, I believe it is. And Julie Arena typically comes to those to give the board a monthly update on what HOPE is involved with. So I would assume that we'll have a significant update for you on December 8th as part of that goal setting. So I think it's unlikely you'll hear much from me before now and then, but I would put that as a placeholder for additional dialogue. There is a timing consideration here as well as it relates to money. If the board was so inclined to provide any funding, the funding, could potentially come from some of our CARES Act money. I asked Mary to update our figures as to where we're at. You'll recall that the board allocated the majority of our CARES Act funding about a month ago, but we did leave some money in reserve that the board was going to come back and revisit the first part of December. And so keep in mind that if we were to consider using that money, that decision would need to be made quickly because it would have to be spent before the end of the year, and Mary would have to be obviously involved in this. Mary's on the line as well, and I would invite her input. Also, keep in mind that this request is something that we have not budgeted, and so we have not budgeted money specifically for this. So I would recommend that it would come from CARES Act funding if the board was even willing to consider it. So, Mary, any insight or feedback you'd like to provide?
Well, Joe, I don't know if you got while you were talking earlier, I sent you a spreadsheet. And right now there is no CARES Act funding left, I think. We're right at we're probably $100,000 in the hole. That's with, pretty generous estimates on my part on what we might spend in a month and a half. But at this point, there is no CARES Act of the original CARES Act funding left after our commitment already.
So commissioners, that might make the decision more clear
Yes, it does.
in your mind potentially. And but just know that I don't have all the details at this point. The city manager said he would be coming back with a formal request associated with the details of what's being proposed and what's being sought from the county.
And there may, there very well could be no CARES funding coming in the next calendar year. So there's always that.
I guess my concern also is how these proposals keep coming to us like this. To me, they seem to be off the wall. And how is this going to be something we have to continue funding to? I mean, there's a lot of questions I have about that. How, if it's going to be a regular line item in our budget, we need to talk about that.
Absolutely. Mary, can you display that spreadsheet real quick? I think it'd be good for the board just to see what you provided. Do we need to make you presenter, Mary? Erica, can you make, or Teresa, could you make Mary the presenter?
Yeah, it should be going ahead now. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Whoa, little.
Hey, Mary, you're on mute.
There you go. Can you see the spreadsheet?
Yeah, this is the CARES funding.
The CARES funding. We've drawn down all but $916,000, and just known costs that I believe we still will incur between now and the end of December is $649,000. So that leaves $267,000. We've already promised, we committed to Benton Community Foundation, the United Way for Children, and then Landing Works. So we have $300,000 committed to community organizations. We agreed to give $30,000 to the city of Corvallis for their economic development program. And then we reimburse ourselves for lease costs and iPad fleet. So right now, if the numbers are correct, we have spent all of our funding.
So Mary, just to make sure I understand, that those potential uses are dollar amounts that we have already committed to, and based on those commitments, we end up $147,000 in the hole.
Correct. And that's assuming that that I'm online with the projection of costs that I know are coming down. So we're close in $3 million. So.
Well, thank you for that, Mary. That helps
That's helpful. Yeah, it does.
clarify.
So commissioners, we'll bring this back to you as well when we talk about this topic on December 8th, just in case we have any updates between now and then to these numbers, because we are going to have to figure out if we are in the hole, where is that going to come from?
Exactly.
And, or if we need to make some changes to what we've committed to.
I assume, Mary, the idea is to end up at the end of the year at 0. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, we certainly don't want to leave any money on the table. So, and that was a concern a month ago, that we didn't have a plan to spend the funds, and that's not a concern anymore.
Mary, when we spoke last on this particular topic, I thought we ended up, or we were projecting where we were going to hold aside upwards of 150 to 250,000. I thought was what we thought a reasonable target was, that we thought we were going to have left. So what has changed between now and then?
I just changed it to October. That's the bottom line there is the 140. Down. And what's changed is our rate of spend on actual expenditures. And the drawdown. So I'm trying to keep up with what we've drawn down and then take off the expenses that I was. So we've committed to Chance Housing extra money, and then we're no longer paying. We've paid back the personnel costs, and I didn't realize we'd pay it down as fast as we did. So a lot of that, probably now we're spending about $100,000 in personnel. And I was projecting that we wouldn't, and that we would actually sort of break even, 60,000. So really where the difference is in personnel costs. And I think some of that can be transferred, because I think some of the contact tracers are being charged here right now, and they actually have their own funding source. So we need to straighten that out between us and the health department. So there is some give and take and truing up of who's paying for what, particularly in personnel.
Are you able to resolve those items between now and December 8th?
We can certainly, yes. I need to find out if the contact tracing funds have started coming back in or not. That was one of the questions with Charlie. Because he said
I think it's important, Mary, that we try and bring as close to an accurate representation to the board on December 8th, because they don't have that much left of an opportunity. If we do have any dollars that appear to be remaining, we need to probably decide at that meeting how they're going to be allocated. We may not be in that fortunate position, and we may be in the hole, and we'll still have to figure out how we're going to cover that. So one way or another, I'd like to try and come to some conclusion on this December 8th if we can.
Right, and we're working on, I actually have Jane working on trying to track where all the, particularly the personnel costs, so yes.
Thank you. So Commissioners, that was a much broader discussion than I anticipated we would have on this topic, but that's really the biggest item I wanted to share with you based on returning from vacation and trying to sort through a pile of emails.
And I appreciate that, Joe. And I think, as we engage in these conversations, I really think we have to be very cautious of what requests we're responding to.
Agreed.
All right. Well, Mary, you have 2 weeks to, I guess, screw these numbers up and give us the best estimate where we're at, and then we have more weeks to make any adjustments. But I would appreciate another update December 8th with whether we're in the hole or have a few dollars to allocate.
Yeah, and I will have better numbers on December, because then November is behind us, and we've had some fairly large purchases on PPE. We'll all be paid for November, so I'll have an idea of what's going on there.
Okay, well, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Anything else for us, Joe?
No, I do not have anything else, Commissioner. Thank you.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you. I've been shivering since I arrived back. It's cold here.
Where were you, Joe?
Commissioner, I went to St. Martin, which is an island in the Caribbean.
Joe,
75 degrees, blue sky and sunshine.
Joe, we call this winter. So.
Understood.
Welcome back. Annabelle, do you have anything else for us?
No, not today. I'm fine.
And I think I will get back to the tree business. So,
Hey, it's that time again, isn't it?
oh, it's definitely that time. So the only other thing is item 7, other, and we've had quite a few others already, but anything else?
No, I'm assuming everybody's going to have real quiet Thanksgivings this year. But happy Thanksgiving.
I almost forgot. That's 2 days away, Annabelle. That's a long ways off.
Well, I'm used to going to a Thanksgiving with 25, 30 people. There's only going to be 2 of us this year.
Well, you have a couple dogs and a cat, and so you have some other company.
Yeah, we have them.
Have them sit at the table so it seems fuller.
Well, they kneel at the table already, so you know.
Well, if there's nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you all.
This conference is now